Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, Jeff and Vince give you our 10 Dodgers to know us. Let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Dodger fans. I am Jeff Snider of Baseball Essential. That is Vince Samperio, one of those directions of Chavez Ravine Fiends. And this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. This is the daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue. And Vince, it's been so long since you and I have recorded an episode together that I forgot which way I'm supposed to point. Oh, I would have guessed it right. I should have just guessed. Look at that. I'm so good at this. How you doing, Vince?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it has been a while. But we're here and we're together and we got a good one coming up for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're on the social medias, particularly the tweet bots, there's been a thing going around. I don't know if it started with movies or if this is a long-standing theme with a lot of different things, but basically 10 blank to know me, where you list 10 things, and theoretically, by the time somebody has read all 10 of those things, they know exactly what is all there is to know about you. And somebody mixed that up and made it about the Dodgers, 10 Dodgers to know me. And so Vince and I thought, well, there's two of us, and one of the things we've talked about, Vince, that you and I like about hosting a podcast together is we are different ages. You are actually closer in age to my daughter than to me, just by like 6 months or so. You're not a child like my daughter, but you're almost 31 and I am almost 45. And so we come from slightly different eras of Dodger baseball. And so I thought this would be fun because we're not going to have a ton of overlap. We'll probably have one or two people maybe who are the same, but I think the 10 Dodgers to know me and the 10 Dodgers to know you are going to be pretty different.
Yeah, it'll definitely be different. And when I was coming up with this list, there might be some names that surprise people or the listeners of the podcast or followers of my timeline. But some of the names are like, guys, if you knew me my whole life, you would understand it. But if you've only known me since I've been like on social media, then you probably would be like, oh, really? Because I don't talk about it as much. But either way, I feel like we'll have a good mix of names. And like I said, I don't know, maybe one or two overlaps, but I can't see too many other than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of the same way. It's not necessarily my 10 favorite Dodgers. That's a different conversation that if this lockout keeps going, we'll probably end up doing that too. But this is, I think there's going to be stories behind some of these, that who are meaningful to our Dodger fandom for whatever reason, I guess. So I say we just jump in. You ready to jump in?
I'm ready to get into it.
All right. Why don't you go first? I don't even know what order I'm going to do mine in, but why don't you go ahead and go first?
Yeah, I don't really have a particular order, but I will start with, I guess, the one that kind of defines me now, and the one that's kind of, brought me, I wouldn't say notoriety, but that people kind of have recognized me before about. It's Chris Taylor. Obviously, the tweet that got it all with the Dodgers acquired Chris Taylor in exchange for Zach Lee, from the Seattle Mariners in exchange for Zach Lee. It's just become a running joke at this time. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do for 2022 since he's back, but it is a little bit different dynamic. But either way, Chris Taylor's got to be the first one for me.
Yeah, that's a good one. The Dodgers acquired Chris Taylor in exchange for, however many millions of dollars they gave him. Just, throw in the contract terms instead. Yeah, Chris Taylor's a good one. I'm going to start with my first favorite player, and that's Mike Marshall. And this one, it really this is a good example of, I think if you know that my first favorite player was Mike Marshall, that does tell you a lot about me. I've mentioned this before. I think I mentioned it last week when I was talking to whichever minor leaguer I was talking to, John Rooney last week, that my first favorite player was Mike Marshall because my older brother, you learn from your older brothers, and my older brother's favorite player was Steve Sachs because Steve Sachs was small and fast and played second base like my brother did. And I thought, well, I guess I need the big, lumbering, slow, goofy-looking guy who plays first base and right field like I do. So I went with Mike Marshall. And it's like, the fact that I picked a favorite player because he had all the same characteristics that I perceived as negative in myself probably tells you, would tell a psychiatrist a lot about me anyway. So if this was 10 Dodgers for my shrink to get to know me, I think Mike Marshall would be a really good place for me to start.
Yeah, maybe that if the lockout keeps going, we have to bring in a therapist and just talk through some things on Locked On Dodgers.
Well, I've got at least one more therapy related one on my list. So
in that vein, I'll go with my first favorite Dodger, and it's Mike Piazza. Growing up, I played catcher. I wouldn't say because of Piazza, usually it was because nobody else wanted to play catcher growing up, and I would always, be able to want to do it. But, the guy just first favorite Dodger, didn't really understand what happened when he got traded. I was 7 years old at the time still. Even not until I went for Griffey, but he also got inducted the same year. Not until I went to that did I realize Mike Piazza, at the end of the day, wasn't really a Dodger anymore. He was beloved by Mets fans and beloved by New Yorkers. And, to me, he still felt like a Dodger just because he was, me and a lot of my friends' favorite Dodgers growing up. But at the end of the day, he was a Met and he went in as a Met, but he'll still be my first favorite Dodger.
Yeah, that's a good example of the generational difference. I don't drink, but if I did, I would have been old enough to do it when Mike Piazza was traded. And, you were not old enough to understand why Mike Piazza was traded. So
Yeah.
and you probably wish you could drink. So, next one, I'll go with maybe my second favorite player after Mike Marshall, even though Mike Marshall was still on the team, Oral Hershiser. For me, like I was a pitcher and Oral was the best pitcher on my favorite team. At least, Fernando Valenzuela was, but, by the time I was really paying attention, Fernando had started to have some of the injury issues and stuff that led to basically the last 2/3 of his career not living up to the hype. And Oral had the same issues, but a little bit later. And so he was in his peak, obviously 1988 was his peak year. And I was 11 years old. It was a great year for me. And so Oral Hershiser, I was a big Hershiser fan. And then the fact that for my 40th birthday, my wife arranged for Oral Hershiser to be part of my celebration. I got to, longtime listeners will know, I got to sit in the broadcast booth with Joe and Oral for a game in June of 2017. And just the fact that Oral Hershiser was part of my birthday celebration just blew my mind then, still blows my mind now. And it's pretty darn cool. And so Oral's definitely on my list.
Dope. I guess we'll get one more in before the break. I'll stay in the 90s, and I'll go with one that I don't really talk about too much just because I guess I don't really have a need to, but Raul Mondesi was also one of my favorite Dodgers growing up. And, playing in the front yard, imitating the way he stepped into the box, moving the bat forward, putting his helmet down as he stepped into the box. And then, good, he'll be similar to a guy I talk about later that also kind of defines me, but just a dynamic talent. And, one of the guys on those 90s teams when I thought the Dodgers were great and amazing, but then I realized they weren't that good overall, but they had a lot of not big names, but big names to me. And he's one of the ones that stands out.
Yeah, absolutely. Raul Mondesi, he was one I considered for my list for sure. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We've got a lot more Dodgers to know us coming up. But first, let's talk a little bit about Built Bar. As you know, the new year is coming up, and that means New Year's resolution. And if your resolution is about getting fit or eating healthier, like mine is, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, maybe even better than a candy bar. It makes it easier to stick to your resolution because it tastes so good you'll want to eat it. Unlike other protein bars that can be chalky or waxy or taste like a chemical spill. You want to eat healthy, but it just gets so boring. By week 3 or day 3, you're thinking, come on, where's the chocolate? Well, Built Bars are all covered in 100% real chocolate. Most of the bars have about 130 calories, 4 or 5 grams of sugar and carbs, 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has about 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of carbs. Here's an idea for the new year. Go to all your secret treat stashes at home, in the pantry, at the office, in the car, wherever. Throw out all the sugary or calorie-filled treats and replace them with Built Bars. So when you're craving a snack or a treat, you can reach for something that's healthy and tastes incredible. Even if you're not a huge fan of working out, you can at least eat something that tastes good and is good for you. That way, When you enjoy a delicious Built Bar, you can almost count it as a workout. And there's so many flavors to choose from: coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie, and many more. In fact, Built is always coming up with new limited time flavors. So check out Built.com often to see what's new. And when you go to Built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and you will get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. And now we're back. And I guess it's my turn. You just did Raul Mondesi, who always reminds me, he'll be a good segue into my next one. Raul Mondesi, I always think of going after Dodger games, going out and standing by the player parking lot when I was a kid and trying to get autographs there. And it was so much fun. We did it after every game we went to. That was our way of beating the traffic. We just stayed for, an hour and a half after the game until all the players had come out. And it's the reason I think of Raul Mondesi is because one time there was this kid just standing next to us and Mondesi came out and this kid just said, "Raul, please, Raul, please, Raul, please." And just the combination of repeating the same two words over and over and pronouncing Raul as Raul just stuck with me. And so we still in my family refer to Raul Mondesi as Raul, please. But the reason that's a segue is because the next guy on my list is Brett Butler. Brett Butler wore number 22 for the Dodgers. Spoiler alert, he won't be the last Dodgers number 22 on my list. But he was always so cool. He'd come out and sign autographs. Eric Karros almost made my list for this same reason, because he and I actually had a conversation by the players' parking lot. But Brett Butler would come out and he would talk with the kids while he was signing. And one time, my brother was up on my dad's shoulders to hand something over to Brett Butler. And Brett Butler just said, "Hey, kids, stay up there for me." And so my brother would get things from kids and take them and hand them over to Brett Butler, and he would sign them, and then he'd hand them back to the kids. And so my brother still sometimes refers to himself as PAB, P-A-B-B, which stands for personal assistant to Brett Butler. But, just that Brett Butler for me reminds me of that childhood experience of getting autographs by the players' parking lot after games. And that was very meaningful to me. And it's something that I've never done with my kids. And I don't even know if it's like, I don't think the players' lot is as accessible these days as it was when I was a kid. Where it was now is now, one of those new restaurants out in the left field pavilion. But yeah, it takes me back to my childhood, and I really, really like those times.
Yeah. The next one I have is probably the most random player on here, and it's just one, I guess, truly, I don't know, it's a deep cut. Like, if you know me, if you know this guy, you know me pretty well, and it's Mike Fetters. It's, probably, similar builds. That's what always draws me to some guys, but also just the way he was on the mound when looking away, and then just the quick head turn toward the catcher, and the form of, I guess, intimidation, or maybe that whatever he thought it helped him with. But it's one of those that he's just like the obscure former Dodgers that we used to do. He's one of those guys that's like the probably top tier for me of obscure former Dodgers.
So I wasn't the first chubby Mormon you liked, huh?
No, apparently not.
Good old Mike Fetters. Who am I going to go with next? All right. I guess my next one I'm going with the only guy on my list who I never saw play, and that's Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax, I know it seems generic, but I named a kid after him, so he must mean something to me. Something about Sandy Koufax and, having to retire young, and the religious angle of it, even though it was a different religion than I am, but the fact that his religion was a big part of his story as a baseball player. And I'm a religious person. And so that kind of always appealed to me. Something about, I don't know. It's funny. I make fun of left-handers all the time. I call them wrong arms. I refer to it as a birth defect. And yet so many of my favorite people are left-handed, including Sandy Koufax and, Vin Scully, and one other person who will be on my list in a minute. I'm giving a lot of Clayton Kershaw hints. It's going to be such a surprise when Kershaw's on my list. But yeah, Sandy Koufax, just everything about his story, it just appeals to me and means a lot to me as a Dodger fan.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree with that one. Our next one's going to be a two-pack, just because they're in the similar sense of why I'm probably connected to him.
Wait, are you doing two people for one spot?
No. knocking
oh,
two out with just
okay.
one
Because
turn.
I have two different spots that I did two people for one spot. So my 10 Dodgers is 12 people. So just so you know, spoiler alert.
Yeah, I like to play the game the right way. So
Yeah, I don't.
so I have Fernando Valenzuela and Julio Diaz. Obviously, for reasons known, they are Mexican, and I am Mexican. I don't like saying Mexican American. I like saying Mexican, but either way, yeah. I mean, Fernando, I technically saw play in his later days, I would imagine, but not when he was at his peak. Obviously, definitely not Fernando Mania. Julio, now I've been able to follow his career basically since the Dodgers signed him out of Mexico. But just, representation matters, and that's, these guys are a clear case that when you see somebody that is either similar to you in whatever sense it is, that it's special, and these guys definitely flaunt that and are proud of their roots, but also over here in Los Angeles repping the Dodgers, both helped the Dodgers win World Series championships. So that's kind of got to be the easiest one to have on there for sure.
Yeah, those are good ones, and yeah, representation does matter. If I had thought more about that, maybe I would have picked Mike Fetters for my list. Next one, I'm going to go with Russell Martin. Russell Martin was my favorite player for a long time. By a long time, I mean basically his whole first stint with the Dodgers, and I was at his major league debut. I was there with my wife. I think it was only the second Dodger game I had ever been to with my wife, and yeah, being there, like we knew we were going to the game, and then the day before, Dioner Navarro got hurt, and I started to get excited, like, oh, the Dodgers might call up Russell Martin. Back then, they called him Russ Martin, and I was so excited, and my wife didn't understand why I was excited. But the game, he got called up, he made his major league debut. The game ended on a play at the plate that he made a catch and put a tag down to end the game. I think anyway, pretty sure that's how. I know there was a play like that at the plate, and I'm pretty sure that's how it ended the game. And so for whatever reason, I just had this emotional bond with Russell Martin that lasted for a long time. And I've probably mentioned this before, when in 2000, I guess it was after the 2010 season, when in the same week the Dodgers non-tendered Russell Martin and signed Juan Uribe. So they got rid of my favorite player and signed Juan Uribe, who at the time was my least favorite player in baseball. It was hard for me, and it really tested this whole rooting for laundry concept. Like, because like if I can root for Juan Uribe, and after they just got rid of Russell Martin, so getting rid of Russell Martin because he was going to make a little bit of money, kind of it says a lot about the McCourt years, which is kind of an important part of my Dodger fandom is the McCourt years. And so between that and my emotional connection to Russell Martin, that's why I picked him.
Yeah, I wonder if this is the only one we overlap on, because I also have Russell Martin. I mentioned my affinity for catchers. He was obviously a catcher. Before I started just getting like the knockoff jerseys just to have them, he was the last player jersey I bought. And when the Dodgers non-tendered him and he ended up leaving, I vowed to never buy another player jersey again of a current player. So, and then when he came back, I still had that jersey. And then it was the J Martin jersey when he had the J on there. So, but yeah, he was a guy. And then when he came back, obviously it was fun. And, he became the running joke of a reliever and everything else. And he had that big hit in the NLDS that year. So, yeah, Russell Martin is maybe the only overlap we have.
Might be. I guess we'll find out. Yeah. But before we find out, let's talk about BetOnline. BetOnline.ag has you covered this holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as football continues its march through the College Bowl season and the Pro Football Playoffs. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code LOCKEDON to receive your bonus. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we are back. I guess it's my turn. I guess since I teased me cheating and flaunting the rules, I'm going to go with the combination of Joe Amalfitano and Ron Paranoski. Joe Amalfitano was the Dodgers third base coach when I was a kid, and Ron Paranoski was the Dodgers pitching coach when I was a kid. And just something about those two guys, like Tommy Lasorda. Everybody knows Tommy Lasorda, but for me, it was always those two guys. And Manny Mota was the first base coach too, but for some reason it wasn't. I guess they had a few different first base coaches come in and out, but Amalfitano and Paranoski were just kind of the standards basically the whole time that Lasorda was manager, at least while I was growing up. They were there with him. And Joe Amalfitano's home run thing where just coming around, the guy coming around third base, and Amalfitano would stick out his right hand and give a little low five and then slap him on the butt with his left hand as they ran past. It was just like, that's what a third base coach should be. And Ron Paranoski, like when I was a kid, I remember noticing he was the only pitching coach I ever saw who would actually make pitching changes. Most of the time with most teams, if the pitching coach came out, it was just for a visit. And if the manager came out, it was for a pitching change. But Tommy Lasorda trusted Paranoski to make pitching changes sometimes. And then also Lasorda would just come out and do mound visits sometimes just because that's who he was. But those two guys kind of define my childhood watching Dodger games in a way that just kind of the guys in the shadows on the sidelines a little bit, but the important work they did. And that might be another one that my shrink might have fun with, why I chose the third base coach and the pitching coach instead of the flamboyant, flashy, famous manager. So
Amalfitano from San Pedro. So didn't really know him too much, but he's from where I'm from, so I'll respect him. All right, I got 3 left. These are all ones that everyone who's probably listening to this, if you know me for a while, it's going to make sense. The first one I'll go with is Eric Gagne. I've talked countless times about how Gagne, the game over era, was probably, to me, some of the loudest still I've ever heard the stadium. People would actually stay to the 9th inning. He was the show. He was, the attraction you were going for. And for 84 straight games, he was the guy that the Dodgers called on to close the game, and he got the job done. So he, regardless of everything else that's happened since then, it's very hard to take away what that time was for me growing up, and probably for Dodger fans, a lot of Dodger fans my age in general, and even a little bit older.
Yeah, we had him on our old podcast as a guest a couple of years ago. We should try to get him on again. I think I still have his number.
Yeah.
All right, my next one. I'll do the other one where I'm doing two guys in one thing, and this one makes even more sense maybe. I'm going with Jeff Kent and JD Drew, just because they really say something about that era of Dodger baseball. That the team was bad, didn't make the playoffs, lost in the playoffs when they did make it, and then I just think about that play. When was it? 2005, against the Mets. 2006, when Jeff Kent and JD Drew got thrown out at home plate on the same play in a playoff game, and two guys who nobody liked, like personality wise, like they're two noted jerks who didn't really fit in as Dodgers in a lot of ways, even though they were both pretty good for the Dodgers. And so in that way it was good, but just having two jerks get thrown out at home on the same play just says a lot about the Dodgers team at that time and everything. And so whatever it is, that play, I remember watching it. I was, I should have known it was 2006 because I was in a home that I owned, and I didn't own a home until 2006. But yeah, I remember watching that game. I had my neighbor over who was a Dodger fan. We were grilling up some Dodger dogs, which was also a disappointment. When you buy your own Dodger dogs and grill them at home, you realize they don't taste very good. And then those two guys get thrown out. Just everything about that game was just kind of symbolized the disappointment of being a Dodger fan in 2006-ish.
Yeah, I remember watching that play live. And not fun. But I got 2 more. I'm realizing my last 3 that I saved all have some kind of stain on them, I guess, to a certain extent. But either way, like you can't change how they changed your fandom. The next one is Yasiel Puig. He was a guy, and followed him since he got signed with Julio on that same trip. Was there for his major league debut. Was one of his supporters for the long haul. And then everything since he's left the Dodgers has kind of been a mixed bag and not a lot of great things. But regardless, like I said, you can't change what was going on at that time. And he was a guy that came in and infused the Dodgers for a few years, made the playoffs every year. He was with the Dodgers, had some big playoff moments, had some big moments in general. Was a polarizing player, but for the most part, it was all pretty harmless at the time, at least on the field stuff. So, yeah, he's a guy that for sure, and especially in the social media era, Puig was my guy. And I think last week was the day that he got traded, and I was looking at my old Instagram stories and had a whole story dedicated to Yasiel Puig with different photos. So that was my guy.
Yeah, Puig almost made my list. He might have on another day for all the same reasons you mentioned. Like he was Dodger baseball there for a little while, but he didn't. But a different outfielder who was a teammate of his and who actually got traded in that same trade is on my list, and that's Matt Kemp. Matt Kemp, 2011, was maybe the most fun that I've ever had watching any particular player. I have very distinct memories of like being out at dinner with my family and say, "Oh, the Dodger game has started. Looks like the Dodgers have probably batted in the first inning by now. I'm going to look and see what Matt Kemp did." And without fail, it seemed like be like, "Oh, the Dodgers up 1. Oh yeah, Matt Kemp hit a home run," or "Oh yeah, Matt Kemp had an RBI double." It was just he was so good that year. It just one of the best players we've seen in a long time. Should have been the MVP that year, and at the time, it seems crazy to think about now, but at the time, he actually was the active leader in most consecutive games played before he got hurt against the Rockies in 2012. He was at like 380 something straight games, I think, pushing 400 straight games, hadn't missed a game. He was durable. He was awesome. He was even good defensively. He had gotten to that point. And just Matt Kemp, young Matt Kemp, when he was in shape, was just so much fun to watch and easily one of my favorite Dodgers of all time.
Yeah, it's hard to go wrong with Matt Kemp. I feel like when I was making my list, I guess I've kind of avoided trying to be the fan of like the best players at the time because, Kershaw, Kemp, like even I don't know if you have Ethier, but even Ethier, like those guys were big, the household names, but I don't feel that connection to them and I don't have that connection to them. But I don't know, for whatever reason that is, maybe that's a therapeutic thing to talk about. But either way, my last one's Manny Ramirez, and Manny Ramirez is the reason I saw the Dodgers. One of the reasons I saw the Dodgers win their first playoff series in my life. They had won one playoff game from the time I was born until 2008 when he went on that tear, and the Dodgers made it to the NLCS back-to-back years. Manny Wood, another time where that was probably very consistent. He was just show. He was the attraction. He was the guy that you wanted to watch. He was the guy that you stop and make sure that you're watching his at bat. And like I said, another guy that has had he got caught with the Dodgers specifically. But either way, you can't change how he made you feel when he was playing for the Dodgers. And he's the guy that like I said, we brought the Dodgers into that next round. Like, okay, we can make it past the first round. And then it took a few years after that to get back into it. And now we're just spoiled Dodger fans now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you did go out with a bang with Gagne, Puig, and Manny. That's a good trio to end with. So I actually have two left because you went first and you lumped your two Mexican boys together. So I'll just do my last two. Next one is Justin Turner, who it's kind of the same thing. I kind of had the same thoughts you did of like, it's not just the best players, it's who you connect with. That's why I don't have Ethier on my list because like it's one of those things that I understand why people have that connection under Ethier. I just don't. Like I liked Ethier just fine when he with 2009 when he had all those walk-off hits. He was fun to watch, but I just never had that connection. But Justin Turner, something about him being he doesn't look super athletic, and what's the nice way of saying he's ugly? Like he's not ugly, but he's not like there are some baseball players you're like, how are you a person? Like, how does this happen that you have this athletic ability and you look like a Greek god? Like Matt Kemp, Matt Kemp is so good looking, and Ian Desmond, man, maybe we'll just do a whole episode one time where Jeff insists that he's straight while he gushes about these good looking baseball players. But, but Justin Turner isn't that, and yet he is popular and very good at baseball. And, something about the fact that he grew up a Dodger fan and made it to the big leagues and then thought that he had basically failed in the big leagues and then somehow ended up being a superstar for his childhood favorite team. It's like they should make a movie about Justin Turner because Justin Turner's entire life is movie worthy, and something about that really appeals to me. And so I like Justin Turner a lot. And then my last one is Clayton Kershaw, believe it or not. Kershaw, obviously it bucks the trend of don't just go for the best players because he is the best pitcher probably in Dodgers history. And if he's not, I also have Sandy Koufax on my list. So, but Clayton Kershaw is my favorite player of all time. If I had kids a couple years later, one of them might be named after Clayton Kershaw. Like he is everything about Kershaw on the field and off the field is something I admire, and something about the fact that like you don't expect to get a new favorite player of all time when you're in your late 30s. But Kershaw, I was a huge Nolan Ryan fan. That's another guy I named one of my kids after, and so like I think my two favorite players were Cal Ripken Jr. and Nolan Ryan. And the fact that Clayton Kershaw beat out those two guys says something about him. And I know that just, maybe just reminding me that you can get a new favorite player even when you're an old man like me. It's kind of meaningful that baseball doesn't stop being awesome just because you stop being young,
Yeah, I wonder who that guy's going to be for me. Maybe I hope it's Juan Soto.
Yeah. Dodgers outfielder Juan Soto.
Yeah, I hope that's the guy that I'll be like, man, I found my favorite player in my late 30s, and that's going to be the guy.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Juan Soto is currently on the Nationals. We had somebody tweet at us that we need to mention when we mention non-Dodgers, we need to mention what team they play for because he only pays attention to the Dodgers. So Juan Soto is currently on the Nationals, but hopefully on the Dodgers in the next few years. That's my goal in life. So
there we go.
Well, this was fun. Well, I feel like our listeners probably know us a little bit better in the context of the Dodgers. So that was fun. Vince, you have any final thoughts before we wrap it up?
No, it was nice to have somebody to talk to. It makes these episodes a lot easier and a lot more fun.
Absolutely. Let's do it again sometime.
Yeah.
Thank you all for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. We really appreciate it. We will be back tomorrow like we are every weekday. Maybe we'll be back together tomorrow because this was so much fun. Maybe we'll do it again tomorrow. So for your second listen today, check out Locked On Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Locked On Bets, hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available on all platforms. If you're not listening to or watching Locked On Dodgers every day, go ahead and add 1 or 2 days a month to your rotation. That would make us super happy. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at Vince Samperio. I am on Twitter at Snidog, and the DMs are open in all of those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com, and our phone number for voicemails or text messages is 323-863-LOCK-5625. We are here every weekday morning. We hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.